Most people think photo engraving is just about finding the right settings, but the reality is if you're guessing, your results are always going to be inconsistent. You might get something that looks decent once, but then the next time you try it, it looks completely different. That's because you're not following a structured process. And in this video, I'm going to show you the exact method I use to get consistently high quality photo engraves on any material. And once you understand this, you'll never need to guess your settings ever again. The reason most people struggle with photo engraving isn't because their machine isn't capable, it's because they're relying on random settings or copying values that have worked for someone else on a completely different machine with completely different materials. That approach might work occasionally, but it's not reliable. But what I'm going to show you today is a repeatable system that removes that guesswork and gives you predictable results every time. This method works in 3 stages. First, we find the general range of settings that works for your material, then we refine those settings to dial them in properly, and finally we optimize the DPI to get the best possible level of detail. By the end of this process, you'll have a set of settings that you can save, reuse, and apply to future projects with utter confidence. The first thing I always do is I start with a high quality image. In this case, I've taken a photo and I've cropped it down to just the head and the shoulders, and I've resized it to around 25 by 25 millimeters. The reason for doing this is to keep the test fast and consistent so you're not wasting time engraving large images while you're still trying to figure out the best settings. Next, I go into the material library and I choose the closest match to what I'm engraving onto. It doesn't need to be exact, it just needs to be similar enough to give you a good starting point. Once that's selected, I apply the auto adjust feature, which helps optimize the image by adjusting contrast, brightness, and sharpness. And it will also invert the image if needed, depending on the material. At this stage, we're not trying to get perfect results yet. We're just building a solid starting point that we can refine from. Now we move on to the first test grid. And in this case, I'm using a 4x4 grid, but you can go larger or smaller if you want more or less data. I take the recommended settings from the xTool material library and I place them right in the middle of the upper and lower values. Then I decrease or increase both the dot duration and the power around that midpoint. Everything else stays the same, especially the DPI. That's really important because at this stage, we're only testing 2 variables. Once the engraving is complete, I go through each result and I look for the one that gives the best balance of detail and contrast. When I'm looking at these results, what I'm really checking is how well the image holds its detail without losing any contrast. If it's too light, the image looks washed out and you start losing definition in the shadows. If it's too dark, everything starts blending together and you lose the finer details. What I'm aiming for here is a clear separation between light and dark areas where you can still see texture and depth without any areas looking blown out or overly burnt. And this is important. At this stage, we're not looking for perfection. We're just trying to find the general zone where the engraving starts to look good. Once I've identified the best result from that first grid, I take those settings and build a second grid around them. This time, instead of making large jumps, I'm making much smaller adjustments above and below the best values we just determined. This is where the real refinements start to happen because you're narrowing things down and removing the guesswork even further. After running this second test, it should become very clear which combination of power and dot duration produces the best result for that material. At this stage, the differences are much more subtle, so you need to look a bit closer. I'm focusing on edge clarity, fine detail, and consistency across the image. You want clean transitions between the tones, no harsh jumps or muddy patches. If areas start looking rough or grainy, that's usually a sign that you've pushed the settings too far. The best result is the one that looks sharp, clean, and balanced across that entire image. By the end of this stage, your settings will already be significantly better than what most people are using. Now that power and dot duration are dialed in, we move on to DPI, which is dots per inch. At this stage, those previous settings stay locked and the only thing we change is DPI. I'll typically test values like 300, 400, 500 and 600. What you're looking for here is the balance between detail and overburn. If the DPI is too low, you'll lose detail in the image. If it's too high, the engraving can start to look muddy or overly dark or light in this case. DPI is where detail really comes into play. Lower DPI can make the image look soft and slightly pixelated, while higher DPI can start to overwork the material and make everything look too dark or muddy. What I'm looking for is the point where the detail looks crisp and well defined, but the image still feels clean and natural without any overburn or loss of clarity. Once you compare the results side by side, it becomes quite obvious which DPI gives the cleanest and most detailed results. At this point, we have now identified the best power, dot duration, and DPI settings. So now it's time to test them properly. I take the full image, I apply those final settings, and run a complete engraving. This is the moment where everything we've done comes together, and what you should see is a clean, consistent, high quality result that directly reflects the work you've done in the previous steps. And the key thing here is that this wasn't guesswork. These settings were built through a structured process, which means you can trust them and reuse them in the future. Now, the real value in this method isn't just getting one good result, it's that you can repeat this process on any material, whether it's wood, acrylic, leather, or metal. The same structured approach applies. And once you've done this a few times, you'll get faster at it. You'll start to understand how materials react, and eventually you'll need fewer tests to get the perfect result. This is the difference between guessing and actually understanding your machine. And for all of my other tutorial videos I've already done up to this point, if I've shared photo settings, this was the method I used to get those settings. So they are proven and they do work. If this video has been useful to you, please hit the like and subscribe button. Also, I have so many tutorials, so many projects on the channel already, and there are loads more yet to come. So feel free to stick around on the channel to get the best out of your laser engraver. Also, if you're looking to purchase an xTool laser engraver, there are affiliate links down below that do support this channel at no extra cost to you, and we do really appreciate it. And finally, if you do want another way to support the channel, you can become an L3D supporter by joining the channel, and thank you to all those members that already have done that. So without further ado, I want you guys to have a great day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.